first and foremost, take your sword out from your side. Okay, now those of you that all have the wooden sword, you don't have a scabbard that your sword is going into. Okay, so with that, you can kind of imagine that you have a scabbard at your side, but what we don't want to do is build bad habits. So for example, without the scabbard, sometimes when people put their sword away, they do this, I call it like playing darts, because you're just kind of throwing it and hoping it lands where it needs to go. But I mean, this thing is sharp, so you got to make sure you're putting it away properly, where you're not poking holes in yourself or cutting off fingers. Okay, so to properly put the sword away, which we'll do that first, then we'll work on drawing the sword out. What you have to factor in is that you would have a scabbard at your side. So for a scabbard, what I would do is I would take my hand and I would cup it up to be level with the lip of the scabbard. You'll notice my first finger kind of sticks out. There's a reason for that, okay? What happens is as I put the sword away, okay, this right here is at the side of my body. What I'm doing is I take the sword, now it's sharp on one side, it is pointy, but it's not sharp on the back like a knight's sword in medieval times, okay? Or just the front, okay? So the back I can touch all day and be totally fine. What I'm doing is I take my pointer finger, the tip of my finger, and I touch the finger guard. What is the finger guard called? Zuba. Okay, it's the finger guard, so if you had two swords clashing and one slides down, you're not losing fingers. Okay? So protect the fingers. What I do is I take the tip of my pointer finger and I touch the Zuba like this. Okay? It's not up like this, because as soon as I start moving, what happens to the finger? Cutting it off. So I keep it on the side of the blade. Therefore, once I start motioning the sword out, I'm not losing my finger in the process. Yes, sir? Okay. Now, what happens? I take the back of the blade, I put it on the lip of the sword, or the lip of the scabbard. My pointer finger touches the Zuba. This is where I start to put it away. Now what happens is I drag it out. The back of the blade isn't sharp, so I'm not worried about dulling the back of the blade. What happens is once I get to a point that the scabbard, the tip of the sword reaches the scabbard, you will feel it kind of the sword kind of drops, and you kind of hear it. You guys hear it? Listen. You hear it? Almost sounds like when you're mini golfing and the golf ball goes into the hole. You hear that little ding, right? So it's the same idea. So once I get a hole in one, boom. Now I can lift the sword and start sheathing it in properly. Okay? The sword is it's curved like a banana. When the sword looks like a frowny face, the blade is up. When the sword looks like a happy face, the blade is down. There's a reason that we keep it in frowny face position when it's at our side. This sword does not fit inside the scabbard perfectly. Because if it fit perfectly, that would mean that the blade is touching the wood inside the scabbard. And every time you draw and unsheath, draw and sheath, you're dulling your blade. Yes, sir?
Yes, sir.
So, it doesn't fit perfectly. There's a little gap of space. That's so when you're drawing and sheathing the sword, you're not dulling the blade in the process. Now, if you flip it, now gravity drops it. Now I start drawing and sheathing the sword. What happens? I'm dulling the blade. Because now the blade is touching the wood versus the back of the blade is now touching the air. So you have to keep it in this position. Yes, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, from the side, draw it out. We'll talk about that momentarily. But putting it back. If you don't have a scabbard, just take your 4 fingers or your 3 fingers and your thumb, connect them. Pointer finger sticks out. Okay, it almost looks like a gun, but you get your thumb down. Back of the blade on this little circle you've created. Pointer finger touches the Zuba. Motion forward. Dips into the hole. Complete. In. Okay? You do that at the side of your body. With the scabbard, boom. It should be where you can draw and sheathe the sword without even looking, okay? If you're having to go, I mean, think about that like on a battlefield, okay? If you're at war right now and you go to put your sword away in the middle of a war, and you're doing this while people are running around slaughtering each other, yeah, what? No! You gotta have your eyes up, okay? So, eyes are up, I can draw and unsheath the sword without actually looking at the sword itself. Everyone understand? Do that for 10 seconds, go. This is mainly practicing the sheathing. Now, hey, don't be sheathing in front in the air, because this does you no good. Do it at the side of your body, okay? It's basically right at your hip bone on your left side. Good. There's essentially two main ways to draw out the sword. More of a beginner-friendly version. Sheathing the sword, there's truly only one way to sheath the sword in the beginner mode. Drawing the sword, you can essentially be drawing the sword out to just, you could be showing your sword off to somebody, so you draw it out one way where you're not necessarily in a threatening environment. You're just drawing your sword out to show someone or to present it to someone or what have you. So you draw it in a way that necessarily isn't cutting something on the way out, versus like, uh-oh, bad things are happening around me. You can turn the sword slightly, boom, and draw the sword out for a cut as you're drawing the sword out at the same time, okay? Now, my sword's pretty beat up because I've done some demos with it. That's not supposed to happen. So, right here, you have this metal part. That part fits into the scabbard perfectly. That part should be secure. So that way when I tilt it, we'll bump into something, the sword doesn't go flying out. All right? Because this doesn't cut anymore. So that's kind of like the safety seat belt to secure the sword in the scabbard. All right? But the problem with that, though, is when it's at your side, for you to just grab it and draw the sword out, that can present as an obstacle for you, okay? Kind of like a seatbelt, even though it keeps you safe. Sometimes if you get into trouble, that seatbelt can also be an obstacle for you, trying to get yourself free to get out of the car, okay? So what you do is you take your thumb, push it. Now what happens is you get enough of the sword out with that metal piece is no longer securing the sword in, okay? Now, pretty loosey-goosey, I can grab this thing and go for my attack. Understand? Gives me a little jump start, if you will. Yep. So now what I want you to work on is, and it's a little hard to do without the scabbard because that kind of controls it for you, but just work on drawing the sword out, maybe doing a cut with it, and then putting it and sheathing it back. Work on that, go. Make lightsaber noises, I'll give you bonus points. All right, never mind. I take it back. Be aware of the direction that your blade is. Some of you are putting your sword away, and you're actually putting it blade down versus blade up. Something you can do, I did this for some beginner black belts a while back, is with the sword out, I take a little piece of like yellow tape or something that stands out versus like brown tape would not stand out from a brown sword. A color that would stand out, and I just kind of layer it on the side that the blade is on. So that way it's a little bit easier to keep track of where there is a difference in the feeling of the sword. Like holding this right now, it feels wrong to me without having to look at it. Okay? The angle, the handle itself is also slightly angled. So there's a difference in the pressure that it has with the indents, the bending of your finger, versus here, it's pushing towards me. The curve comes towards me, versus now the curve of the handle is going away from me. My hands feel that difference, okay? And that's also because I've been doing this stuff for years and years and years. So for you guys that are maybe new to the sword, you don't have that sense yet. So helping put tape on your sword and give it a direction until you've developed that sense can be very, very helpful. So for 10 more seconds, I want to start doing some bump down. Actually, I'll go through the positions first. Another thing to quickly note is all these swords are the same size, which is not realistic. Realistically, you would have a sword that's made to fit your size. So some of my shorties in here with the long swords, it's a little hard to get the arm out all the way. That's, you know, I could get shorter swords for you, but then mom and dad basically have to buy 2 swords for you, which they might be fine with. But I get the lighter wood with the longer swords. That way you'll be able to hold it at the smaller age, and you will still use it at your older age. You're all grandpas and grandmas. This is the blade. Put it away properly again. Put it away. That was proper. What you did before was not. All right, pause there.